Hello. So you have purchased one of my resin castings. I have gone ahead and I have sprayed this with primer. I like to use any sort of primer in a spray paint can. Main thing is that it's important that it bonds to plastic because these are resin, they're basically plastic. So after it's been primed, it's now ready for paint. And so I'm going to paint today a dark bay because I have this to do anyway, so I figured I would kill two birds with one stone and make a tutorial. So what I like to do is I like to use a puppy pad such as this. You can see that it is quite stained. The puppy pads are great for absorbing any spills, wiping your brushes clean, and protecting any surface from paint that you don't want to go where you don't want it to go, and paint, as you know, can. So when I'm doing a dark bay, I actually like to start with a black base. So I'm going to get some black paint. I'm not going to get a whole lot. I'm just going to grab a little bit, and I'm just going to start adding on the paint. I'm using a round larger brush, and it's one that is kind of beat up that I don't mind abusing, because I'm just going to take and I'm going to push the paint into all these little crevices and make sure that it gets in all these little spots, like right here you can see. So you got to kind of push the bristles in so you get good coverage, and make sure that you get the paint all through that in the ears. So, and then I kind of smooth the paint as I go. So basically you're just going to make sure that you fill in all the little crevices, all the little spots. And I like to start with a black coat, base coat, because I think it makes the other colors go down a little bit easier and blend a little bit easier. So I'm just going to continue to brush this with the paint. I'm not using a whole lot. I'm actually using a thinner coat of paint, so it doesn't leave a lot of brush strokes. So when I'm pulling it, and I'm using a cottage cheese lid, an old cottage cheese lid, I like to repurpose things and utilize the free plastic products we get before they go into the landfill. Gets another use out of them. You can also wash them and reuse them if you want, but we buy a lot of these products, so for me it's not really necessary. So anyways, I'm just going to go ahead and finish this up. And you can wear gloves if you don't want paint on your fingers. I usually always have paint on my fingers, so it doesn't bother me that much, but just make sure you're getting in all these little undercuts, because it will matter when your finished product. You don't want it to be unfinished. So, and just check all the edges, because there's always going to be little areas that you missed, like right there, the ears. Okay, so now that we've done this, since I'm doing a black bay, I like to, while the paint is still wet, I like to grab my browns and start laying them on now, because it helps to blend it really nicely. So I am going to start grabbing that, and I'm going to start working with that right into that black paint, because it's going to create that really nice black bay effect that we're going for. And black bays are, well, they're black bays, so they're going to be a very dark chocolatey brown that has got a lot of black in it. So I'm just going to use the slightly wet paint, and I'm going to use the paint to do the heavy lifting and blend this for me, so that I don't have to mix the paint on the palette. And this is going to save me a lot of time, and it's also going to give me a very natural looking bit of shading and color variation as I gradually work this through. Now, I'm not too worried about hitting the mane, because I'm going to come back and do the mane a little bit later. But right now we're just laying down that base brown color. And I'm going to get the ears and this top part of the neck. And again, I'm pushing into all the little spots, and I'm just going to kind of look back and see how I like that. It's not coming out too bad. So I'm going to add a little bit more here and there where I think it needs it. And then I'm going to dip into some, I've got some metallic copper paint here because I really like how a copper paint will add a nice lustrous finish, and I'm going to just kind of gently work that in as well. This gives a nice sheen to the paint job and makes a very nice finished product. And it simulates a horse coat because horses often have a iridescent shimmer in their coat. And I'm going to go ahead and layer on quite a bit. And I'm just working it into the paint, the existing paint. And I'm going to add that in. And you can see that it's kind of giving our paint a little bit more depth and dimension than just being a flat brown or a flat black. And I'm again pushing into those little crevice areas because we're going to be coming back and refining that mane anyway, so it doesn't really matter if you get it on the mane. So I like to think about where highlights would be. So the highlights are probably going to be the cheek area. So I'll add a little bit extra. A little bit there. This will be a highlight area, so I'm going to add a little bit more. And I'm just working the paint in. And I'm going to wipe off some of the excess so I can just kind of smooth it in. I kind of like to work in the direction of the coat of the horse because that's going to make any brushworks that might be in the paint. It's going to make it work with the horse instead of against it. I'm just going to scoop some of the excess paint out of that sculpture because it likes to pool there. And for right here, I'm going to add a little bit more of the copper because that'll be a good accent point. All right. And that is our first coat. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a heat gun to speed up my drying. If you don't have a heat gun, you can use a simple hair dryer. But this is really handy to have. I move my wet paint out of the way so I don't dry it. But this is just going to speed up the drying process so that I don't have to spend so much time. If you don't have a dryer or you don't have a heat gun, you can just let this air dry. But I just move kind of a little bit in circles. If you hold it too long in one spot, it will bubble the paint, and that is not great. You don't want the paint to bubble. So I'm not looking for all of the paint to be dried. I'm just looking for some of it to be dried because I am going to come back with a little bit more of this reddish color, and I'm going to add some copper to that. And I'm going to put a thin layer on my brush. I'm going to wipe off some excess, and I'm just going to do another lighter coat over that darker color, especially in our highlight areas. This is making a really nice bay, and if it's a little too light, we can just simply dip into our dark and grab a little tiny bit to just kind of blend. But this is going to be quite beautiful. If you're going for a red bay, you would definitely want to use more of this combination. But since this is a darker bay, we're going to kind of just work with that. All right. So it's a little bit light now. So I'm just going to grab a little tiny bit of dark, and I'm going to kind of wipe off the excess, and I'm just going to come back and I'm just going to very, very gently just kind of smooth that in. I'm going to actually just be kind of random with where I place it. And I'm going to kind of work where the shadows would be. So under this neck bulge, it's going to be a little darker. So just going to lay that there. I'm going to grab some of my copper because it's getting a little too dark. I'm going to grab a little bit of my copper and red, and I'm just going to blend that. So that's kind of the secret, is you're just kind of blending until you get the perfect finish that you're after. When you get the perfect finish you're after, you can go ahead and stop. So that's coming along really nicely. It's a nice dark sheen. There we go. It's turning into a really nice dark bay. And now I am going to clean my brush. I'm going to hit it with the heat again to speed up the drying. And you can see how it kind of shimmers in the light. There's a little bit of that reddish cast. And now for this next layer, I'm going to take a little bit of a wet brush and I'm going to add a little bit of a wash. I'm going to kind of tap off, but I'm going to get the paint kind of runny like this. And then I'm going to grab a little bit of the copper and I'm going to add that, and then I'm going to go over this as a top coat. And this is just going to be a wash. This is going to settle into all the little details and crevices and kind of act as a way of bringing attention to all the little details. It's also going to bring in a little bit more of that black to that black bay coat while delivering a little bit of that metallic sheen. And as I run out, I'm just going to dip my brush into some water, grab some more black, a little bit of water. I want it nice and thin. I want it really thin. I want it almost translucent so I can see through it. I'm going to tap off the excess because you don't want to apply too much wetness to the paint. It will pull it up. And I'm just going to brush that on. And now we're getting that really nice black bay color that we were after. I'm going to really settle that into the ears. And I'm going to really pay attention to these little crevice areas, because that will save us a little bit of effort and work when we are going to touch up the mane. Alright, so there we have our black bay, and it is looking really nice. Look how shimmery it is. It's really pretty. So I'm going to go ahead and rinse my brush. I'm going to dry it off, and I'm going to set my paint aside, and now I'm going to hit it again with the heat gun. Like I said, a hair dryer is perfectly acceptable, but this really speeds up the process. As you can see, the heat kind of melts the puppy pad top layer, so that looks pretty dry. And now we are going to move on to finishing up the details on the mane. And I'm just going to take a good look at this and see how I like it. And I think I'm going to add a little tiny bit more copper accents to some of the highlighted areas. I'm going to hit this front part of the head, because you got to kind of picture like where would the light be hitting. And then I'm going to just do a little bit of highlight here. I'm going to add a little tiny bit there, and I'm just going to very lightly just blend this in. You're just blending, kind of like you're putting on eyeshadow. You don't want to add too much, but a little is nice. Okay, now we've got some really good spots. And again, if we get too dark, we can just dip into a little black or a little bit of the black paint water, and we can just tone that down anywhere we got a little too overzealous. because the idea is to blend. So, all right, so I'm really pleased with that. It's got a really nice bit of highlight on the cheeks, on the front part of the face, and on the bulging part of the neck. I think I'm pretty happy with how that's turning out. So now we can go ahead and move on to the highlights for the muzzle and doing the detail there. So for that, we are going to actually need to use, I like to use a little bit of light blue, and I use just this Apple Barrel cheap craft Walmart paint. I mean, your supplies don't have to be expensive. This is a brush from Walmart. You know, I'm all about saving a little bit of money, so let's see if this paint is even any good anymore, because I don't use it very often. I don't need a whole lot, so I just dipped in and pulled out a tiny bit. You're probably thinking, now why in the world would you be wanting blue? But blue is a really natural highlight of black, and adding blue will add a little bit of depth, and I like to even add a little bit of darker blue. One of the paints I like to use is this acrylic leather paint. It's by Angelus. You can also use this Folk Art multi-surface. Walmart sells it. The Apple Barrel also makes a version. Very good stuff. It doesn't really matter what brand you use, so much as that you're just applying lighter, thinner coats, and that you're cleaning your brush regularly in between changing colors. So I'm going to grab a little bit of this dark blue. Hopefully it's still good, because the trouble with these paints is they kind of dry out, because they just get messy. It's kind of a pain in the butt. Okay, so I don't need a whole lot, so I just grabbed a little tiny bit there. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in and I'm going to add a tiny, tiny dab of white. It's not a whole lot, but a tiny dab. I don't need a lot, so I'm just going to dip in, pull out what I need, and I'm just going to dot it on there. And then I'm just going to wipe my brush clean before I grab more. I'm going to go ahead and switch to a smaller, finer brush so that I can get into the details more a little better. If I can find the one I want. Let's see. Okay. So I'm using a brush about this size, and I'm going to go ahead and wet it and wipe off the excess, and I'm going to grab a little bit of the light blue, a little bit of the dark blue, and a tiny little bit of the white, and a tiny little bit of black, and I'm going to make a bluish gray color that kind of looks like this. You can kind of see there it's starting to develop. You see that color? It's kind of a steel blue. You can probably even find a blue like this, and I'm going to thin it out a little bit with water because I want it to be a very light coat. And now I'm going to basically paint the muzzle in this color. I'm going to go inside the nostrils, and I'm going to go on top here, and I'm going to just put a very light coat. I mean, it's a very light coat. I'm just going to push it into all the details, and then I'm going to take another brush that is dry. So this is a dry brush, and I'm just going to kind of push and smooth it. And then I'm going to clean it, and then I'm going to look at that, and I'm going to do above the eye. It doesn't matter if you get on the eye, and if I thin it out, I'm going to thin it out quite a bit to where it's nice and runny. So I've got this nice runny bit where it's kind of like the black layer we did. It's a little bit see-through. I'm going to wipe off the excess, and I'm just going to brush that on to that lower eye area, and I'm going to kind of just brush that on all the way to the cheekbone, and I'm just going to kind of let that blend like that. So now I have those nice blue tones that you will see on a clipped Arabian face or on their fine skin. And then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to hit it with the dryer. And I'm going to dry off the excess. And now I'm going to work on the highlights. So I'm going to take that same steel blue gray that I made, and I'm going to add a little tiny bit of white. And again, I'm going to thin this out a lot. I want this to be really thin. So see how thin that is? And I'm going to tap off the excess, and I'm going to hit the top of the nostril. I'm going to add a little tiny bit more white, and I'm just going to hit the top of that nostril area, and I'm just going to go around that nostril. And if I need a little white, I can add a little bit more white. And I can add a little bit of water to thin that paint to make it blend a little better. And now I'm just going to take that and I'm just going to hit the tops of some of these little areas. These are the high points. So the paint will naturally settle and help do the work for you, so it's not terribly complicated. Now I'm going to do the upper eyelid area where the light would hit, and I'm going to do that little area, and I'm going to very carefully kind of place it on the lower one. And you can see that that's turning out pretty good. I'm going to add a little tiny bit more white to that nostril. Again, I'm just using tiny amounts, and I'm thinning it. I'm just dipping and thinning and tapping because I don't want to overdo it. I just want to add a tiny touch. I don't want to add a whole lot. This is just for highlights. This is going to highlight the lips and the lower chin. And I'm going to kind of just, and I'm just going to work that in. There we go. Again on that upper eyelid and that lower lid. So pretty happy with how that's working. And if there's any other areas I wish to highlight, like I'm gonna add a little tiny bit here and a little tiny bit there, that looks pretty damn good. So I like that. So now basically we've got that highlighted done. We're going to come back and redo the eye, but we're going to go ahead and move on to doing the mane. So we're basically going to make the black blue again because we've kind of thinned it. So I am going to mix up a darker version. So as you can see, I've used the dark blue, a little black, and a little bit of the light blue. And I've made a darker version of that gun blue, and I'm just going to come over and I'm going to cover the whole mane, or at least hit the highlights. And I'm going to grab some from that earlier one, and I'm just going to let the watery paint settle where it wants to. And I'm not going to really worry about exacting detail right now. That comes next. I'm just going to apply it, and I'm just going to let it lightly coat it so that I don't get a bunch of unwanted colors in these little areas. I'm just going to hit the top, so I'm not going to really focus on getting it all in, because I want this to be basically a highlight, not. And it's okay if you get a little blue here and there, if you get a little too blue here and there, because we're going to come back with the black and we're going to put in another layer, so it'll all work out. So go ahead and finish that up. All right, I'm pretty satisfied with that. So now that we've got our blue layer down, we are going to go ahead and take a bit of black, And we are going to set a little aside, and we are going to thin that out quite a bit. Actually a lot. We're going to thin it a lot. So it's nice, and it's, you know, like a little thinner than milk. And I'm going to tap off some excess, and I'm just going to come and I'm just going to start layering that on. And as you can see, you can still see some of the blue coming through. But now we can start working on those little strands that are more individual. And I like to just hit the tops so that I'm not destroying any detail. And I'm just going to come and I'm just going to basically let the brush do some of the blending work for me. I just want a little bit of that blue to remain. We've got a little bit of blue there we can come back and touch up. So on these little hairs here, you got to be kind of careful. I like to just again hit the tops, and then I'm going to come back with my watery mix, and I'm going to just push it into all those little holes and crevices. And while I have the black, the thin black, I can just kind of blend that blue right into the neck and make that go away. That little, oops, there we go. So that is how that's looking, and I'm just now going to take and do another wash here. And I'm just letting the paint do the work. I'm letting the paint do the blending. I'm letting it kind of settle so there's still some of those blue highlights peeking through. Because if you look at a horse, their manes are never just flat black or flat white. There's so many colors going on. And as you can see, these don't really take terribly long to do. Okay. So I'm pretty pleased with how that's looking. I'm going to just darken these points along the neck and take a step back and take a look. I like that. I like that a lot. And now we are going to finish the face a little bit, and I'm really going to thin the black. I really want just a black wash. So you can see here when I move the paint around how those little numbers there show up. So that's about the consistency I want. So I want to just have this just fill in all these little cracks here and let the detail of the sculpture through. And I'm going to add a little bit more water, and I'm just going to work all that in. And it's really that easy. If you get something you don't like, you can just wash it off, and you can settle some into that little crevice area. You can settle some into the detail. You can settle some here if you wish. So now that I've got that wash on, you can see the detail is really popping. It looks more natural now. So I'm going to go ahead and hit it with the dryer to just give it a quick dry. Okay. And now for the eye, I'm going to, oops, that does not need to be there. I'm going to go ahead and grab some of my thinner but more thicker dark and add a little bit of thick, and I'm just going to mix, and I'm going to have a really nice consistency. And I'm going to wipe off that little drip off the paintbrush because I don't want that to spill, and I'm just going to fill in the eye. Now, I'm going to be very careful. I'm just going to use the brush, and I'm just going to turn it over, and I'm just going to basically push the brush into the little holes so that I don't have to be so careful. And now, because an eye is never completely black, I'm going to grab a really tiny fine brush, and I'm going to come back to our copper. And it's kind of dried, so it's got a little layer, and I'm going to grab a little bit of the dark, and I'm going to come over here and I'm going to thin it out. I'm going to get it really thin, and I'm going to make a nice thin ink, like about like so. So it's nice and inky, and then I'm going to take the underneath, and I'm just going to put a little tiny bit of the brown right under there, just so, like a real horse eye. When you look at it, there's that little hint of brown. And that's pretty much it, folks. We have painted a medallion, a resin casting, dark bay, and if you want to add markings, and I believe this commission does have a marking, so I'm going to go ahead and pause it. I'm going to look that up, get those markings, and then I'm going to go ahead and add them just for your benefit so you know how I do. Okay, this horse does have a marking, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to go back into my white. I'm going to really thin this out. I'm going to find a spot where I can thin out some white. And I'm going to do it kind of milky and thin, like about like this. And this horse has a star, so I'm going to come right here. It has a little tail, so I'm going to very carefully do that. And that's my first coating, and it also had a small snip and a lower lip, so I'm going to very gently touch the lower lip. I'm going to have to touch that back up with black. It had a little bit of a snip, so I have to kind of use my imagination as far as how much of it would be visible. And now to make a realistic pink is really easy, so I'm going to take my white and I'm going to come over here and I'm going to grab some of this reddish brown, and I'm just going to mix it, and as you can see, it makes a really nice, soft, naturally horse colored pink. So I'm just going to very gently just brush that on. It does not have to be super dark, or you don't want it too pink because horse lips aren't too pink. And I'm just going to be very careful with that. And then I've made a couple little boo-boos, so I'm going to come over here to the black, grab a little black, and I'm just going to repair that little area where I kind of overreached. So now we have our marking. I'm going to do a second coat so it's nice and white. I'm going to wipe off my brush. I'm going to go into my white inky mess that I made earlier. I'm going to add a little tiny bit more white, and I'm just going to add another layer. And that's it. That's pretty much it. So to seal this, you have a couple of options. You can use UV resin. You can coat it with UV resin and stick it under a nail lamp. That'll put a really good high gloss finish on it, which I think is what we're probably going to do with this so that the paint doesn't ever chip off. Or you can also spray it with a matte finisher, basically a clear protectant spray paint. You know, Krylon makes a good one, Rust-Oleum makes a good one. It's polyurethane, and then you can go ahead and do that. But the part to really, and you can do a satin or a matte finish. It's what a lot of model horse people do. They really like that. And then I will go ahead and come back with UV resin, and I will add a little bit of UV resin to the eye to make it realistic, and inside the nostril. So I haven't quite decided yet how I'm going to finish this, but you basically have some options you can choose from. But it's not quite finished yet, so I'm going to hit pause, and I'm going to make those little changes. Okay, I've gone ahead and I have added the UV resin to the inside of the nostril and to the eye. As you can see, the high gloss of the UV resin really makes that eye catch the light and looks very lifelike. as a real horse would. I also very, very lightly brushed some onto the muzzle where the sheen would be, and I just went ahead and that's pretty much how I finished it off. So I'm going to stick this under my nail lamp, my UV light, and I'm going to finish this off, and then I'm probably going to spray it with the protective sealer. And I may have to go ahead and go over that area again, just, you know, because the sealer may reduce that a little bit. But I just wanted to show you, for the sake of this video, some of your options.